Good afternoon and welcome, and thank you for joining me here. This is the first very episode of 9 Degrees North as we aim and look at leading to grow and growing to lead. We're going to have a podcast weekly discussion anchored here where we can understand and look at what it means to be a leader in today's society. So, as an introduction, let me just give you a backstory, quick backstory. So, I'm not going to go into the long version, but to understand this feed of information has come from the push of some great brothers along life's way here, prodding me to not just forego all the previous experience I've had in the pastoral ministry I had, but use this opportunity to help people grow in their leadership, grow in their lives, grow in leading at home, in their workplace. So this morning, now afternoon, and I hope you did get some lunch, but thank you for joining me as we look at leading for growth, or in your case, are you growing to lead? So leading for growth or growing to lead helps us understand that maybe sometimes both of these statements sound great, and oftentimes they might sound positive, especially on their own. But what we want to look at and examine as we begin this podcast on leadership is to look at the picture of why. What drives me? What drives me to be a leader? What drives me to be a better leader? And my question for you is, do you do it just for namesake, or do you do it for the sake of an industry, an organization, a group, a team, people that you're with? Do you do it simply maybe just to be a point of nobility for yourself? So my question for you as we are looking at leading to grow or growing to lead is to ask the question, am I doing it just for my own maturity? I recognize I need to grow. So in my leadership, I'm going to look at ways I need to get better. Or are you even doing it just for a point of, look at me and look how sophisticated I am, and look at this team behind me and look what all is going on? Today, though, I want to spend some time and go over these things and ask some questions and give some direction. It's my understanding all too often neither of those statements are created with the idea of others in mind. Oftentimes our leadership, and many times our leading, is to grow isn't an active choice, it's the reaction to situations and events that are in our lives that push us to grow. And that's a great reason to grow. How often have you ever heard somebody say this to you? How did you get in that position? That's the question. And then you have to answer, well, it just kind of sort of happened. I don't even know the plan or how it got this way. This is just the way that it's developed. Or maybe it's a simpler statement. And maybe it's more of a conversation. Well, this is way better than I ever could imagine. But I definitely am not smart enough to bring all this about and make it happen around me. That's probably really more the category which I've lived in most days. Leading to grow doesn't even sound all that personal. Leading to grow sounds a lot like a corporate or financially motivated agenda. And it's oftentimes far away from personally. I'm growing so I can get better. So here's a statement that many over the ages oftentimes could have as a debate, at the very least, a point of philosophical gymnastics. And the conversation is leaders lead. And my question might be, or do they? They don't have to be taught to be leaders. They don't have to be taught, or they don't have to be trained, is what many people mean by that. Many people often will defer to the fact that leading just comes naturally if you are a good leader. So you might offer there's some pushback on a lot of that. You might recognize that, like, yeah, not all good leaders got to be great leaders just because they were naturally gifted. So that's what we're going to look at. That's what we're going to discuss, and that's what we're going to aim at here for hopefully about the next 20 minutes. But I do want to thank some people that are online and active here. Ryan and Christina, you guys have been a huge part of moving me to where I am to be what I am doing right now. So to those that are gathering here, feel free to leave a comment, post a question. Those might be things that we look at figuring out the agenda of conversation for future Thursdays. But to go look at this conversation, if in your mind you ask this question, is this true or false? And to that answer, I'd encourage you, go ahead and put true or false in your opinion in this statement. Is the statement true that just leaders lead? They naturally lead. They don't have to be taught. They don't have to be trained or even equipped by somebody outside of themselves in their own mind. Does leading really just come naturally? The answer is absolutely not. If you think that you are God's gift to leadership, there are things that you and I should discuss so that you can take over the world and help us in many ways. So let's look at this statement from several different altitudes. I'm talking 100,000 feet, 50,000 feet, 20,000 feet. While we are at this, let's add a few key components to see how this perspective of conversation may shift potentially our preliminary idea of what leadership is. So let's jump in. Here we go. Leaders lead. They don't need any help. They simply are born that way. I'd like to understand first the context of how they're born and how they're born that way, but I will agree that they are born, but I'm not certain how quickly I'll step off the curb and say that they are born leaders. Let's look at how all of us were born, dependent upon one thing other than ourselves, whether you want to end with the mother or the creator of the mother. So now just hear me out for a few minutes before you crucify me in comments, you land-base me. The question is, how were you born? No, this isn't a discussion on birds and the bees. Let's not go there. More specifically, how were you born physically? Were you born apart from your mother? Was your neonatal development achieved on your own apart from the life-giving creator that created you and knit you in your mother's womb? So here's my question. What would it look like to begin if your origin isn't a conversation related to our natural giftedness? This could be argued as a result of our upbringing. Maybe your leadership development was a product of the environment that you lived in, the situation where you presided in your growing up, or even the Lord's blessings and opportunities the Lord has placed you in. Our particular leadership may even be a result of things that were absent in your childhood, things that forced your hand to the fact that you had to grow up real quickly, even your own peers. So keep this in mind. Now, keep with me on this as you hear this. In a few minutes, I'm going to give you a moment to unpack this a bit with me, even in the comments. Your growth, your leadership are no different than your existence. What do I mean by that? Both exist outside of your ability. Both exist outside of your giftedness. Now, hear me out again. I want you to understand certainly who's involved all the way back to that birth that you gave, or it was given to you in your conception. All things that make you you, everything that makes you you, were designed outside of you by God, your creator, and graced to you, given to you by grace. So a great man of God who is a mentor of mine, mentoring me into pastoral ministry, often asks this from a pulpit, and it's perfect. So, Pastor Dan, I thank you for this question. If what I've previously said about your dependence upon God, those things challenge you, do me this favor. Close your eyes, and you can do this. No one's with you right now. You can see me, I can't see you. Close your eyes, put your palm on your belly, and with your finger, your middle finger, your longest finger, place that right in the middle of your belly button. So find your navel with the tip of your finger. Now do this with me. Close your eyes, and with your finger on your navel, answer this very question. Where did my life begin? Is my life dependent upon someone else? Is the continuation of my life dependent upon someone else? But before we answer that question, let me take you to the next step of this conversation. With your eyes closed, close your mouth, calm your spirit, and understand this. Hold your breath. Go ahead, on your own. Hold your breath. In your own kind of independent spirit, don't take another breath, just hold it. Some of you are gifted, some of you can hold it for a long time. But what we need to understand, that first breath you breathe, that first breath of your life that you breathe is ex nihilo, given out by God, breathed into you. God breathed. Out of your mother's womb you came, and out of that amniotic fluid sac, God drew the very first breath into your lungs and caused your nerves to fire. A simple story: when our first child was born, he only would breathe when he was poked or prodded or spurred on by the physician. So much so that it became quite an emergency that they took him, rushed him out of our way, and my wife was stuck as I would say, a prisoner of her own situation, stuck in that bed where she gave birth, and I followed him to nursery out of concern. Out of evidence, God didn't create us by accident. He planned each of our lives with the union of our parents, and He brought us to this point today where your life, your leadership, and 100% of everything you're doing is 100% perfect as designed by God. Now, don't hear me use these words perfect as a measure of your own skill set, because your perfection is a whole nother dialogue and discussion. But understand perfect as it relates to your holy God forming you in your mother's womb. It was not without error. And you might be arguing with me right now, Matt, you don't know my situation. Correct, I don't know your situation. But God knit you and knew you were perfectly and wonderfully made. He did know your situation. Now, flip the conversation with me for a second. Let's flip the coin. This conversation could go down so many rabbit trails. It's not a conversation about the origin of man or abortion or anything else. It's a conversation of giftedness by God. Why do you lead? Here is the heart of truth. Everybody, every single person is a leader. You might argue with that. You might disagree with that. You and I need to understand in our leadership, we're given the opportunity to serve everyone that's simply watching us with and for our reaction. Every single person of every age is leading someone. Although the challenge is that you and I need to come to grips with the fact that the world is watching. At the very simplest level, the son, the daughter, the classmate, the peer, the friend that's on your team with you, the person that watches your reaction to bad news may or may not be influenced by how you respond, but it does go to record. They recall that, they see that, they understand that. How do you respond to bad news? How do you respond to good news? You see, admiration doesn't seek someone's permission. Figure that out. Before we begin to admire someone, we are watching them, we are observing them. Leading by either active or passive actions isn't measured in our own minds, but it's based on what the situation is around us and who's watching. The reality is our leadership and the ramifications of our reactions to situations are in themselves also leadership. Our leadership becomes strengthened by the echo of what we love. Our leadership becomes the evidence of things that we've left behind by the way of choice and decisions, so that we can respond and even speak to situations rather differently, whether remotely, in person, calmly, or respectfully. So this is the first episode of where we're going to go with leadership. We're going to talk about situations. We're going to talk about transparency. We're going to talk about integrity. We're going to talk about home. We're going to talk about health. We're going to talk about everything that you can imagine to make you become a better person. So our leadership becomes strengthened, as I said, by the echo of what we love. We evidence what we love in the how we respond to all things. Our leadership becomes the evidence left behind by the way we respond or even speak. So interesting enough, we have the ability to make a difference in the world around us, good or bad. How we choose to respond to that situation, that awareness, is what we're going to build as we walk through these future discussions of 9 Degrees North and Leading to Learn or Learning to Lead. We're going to choose which one of those categories we are. Do we lead for growth, personal growth, or do we lead what we do every day for financial growth? The conversation's yours, but join me here in future weeks every Thursday at noon to discuss leadership and understand how it applies to me. For all those that have joined me this afternoon for your quick lunch, Thank you for joining me. We're excited for where this is going to go. And please know, in no way, shape, or form is this discussion a pump to pump 9 degrees north. It's a pump to move you along the road of life to make you better. So I sign off by saying this. Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of what we're doing every day. Thanks for joining.